Hi, my name is Rachel Brewster and welcome to my channel, Humor in Heels, where I mostly make fun of myself, and don't worry, there will be plenty of that in this video. But I actually wanted to do something a little bit different today because I just saw the movie Blink Twice yesterday with Channing Tatum, and I loved it. It was so great. If you are hopping on this video because you saw the movie, the title of the YouTube, and you're looking for the TLDR, the too long didn't read, should I go to this movie, am I interested? Shut your mouth. This is a hurry up and take my money situation. Like, go to the theater and see this movie. I loved it so much. I came out of the movie theater like vibrating. Like, it was a mix of, I felt like I had just gotten off of a roller coaster, like a physical roller coaster. Like, I was jittery and like high. And I was texting my girlfriends, like gushing about this movie. And they were like, oh, maybe we should see it in October for like Halloween. And I was like, no, like not on your life. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because your level of spice is like hocus pocus. I'm like mentally effed, which is why I liked this movie, but you wouldn't be able to handle it. But you, if you're watching this video and you saw the Blink Twice trailer and you thought it looked interesting, yes, you should go. Okay, so that's the TLDR. I want to talk about, in this video, I've got like 3 different segments in my head. The first one is like, what are all of the other critics saying that you'll hear consistently? And I want to touch on 3 things in that area that I agree with and want to elaborate on. And then I've got a section of like my criticism and 3 things that I think could have been done perfectly or differently, because it's not a perfect movie, obviously, right? So my thoughts. And then the third section is just like, in the theme of this channel, laughing at myself, because there are 3 things that I was like, duh. Like afterwards watching other people's I was like, oh, I thought I was a pretty smart person and I had no idea that's what was supposed to be going on. Got it. Okay. So I've got 3, 3, and 3. So starting with what everybody is saying. First of all, the acting. It's like, you know, there are bars, good, great, superb. They found that bar and then raised it, right? And Channing Tatum is the epitome of this, right? Like, he plays Slater King, which, brilliant name, right? Slater King. Slater sounds like slaughter, like a chopping, like some, right? And then King, he's a billionaire, right? What a great name. And he embodies it. He's this very masculine, grounded dude, but he is powerful in a way that's sometimes attractive, right? Our heroine, Frida, is attracted to him, but you also see like a darker, ruthless side. And then he also has like a couple of flickers and moments of being adorkable, right? And so you're like, oh, he's a billionaire who's eccentric. But think about like all of those pieces of the puzzle of how you portray somebody with all of those different facets and show them without it feeling like he's like broken character, right? So he pulls that off the entire film. And then at the climax of the film, he has a great scene. My goal is to do no spoilers, though no spoilers. I will have spoilers later and I will let you know when those are coming. But he has a monologue that he gives that I don't know how to describe this acting. It is ruthless and surreal and poignant, and it didn't feel like he was acting. Like the whole time, you know how the eyes are the windows of the soul? I was like, this dude is a real dude. Like, Channing Tatum isn't talking right now. Slater King is talking right now. And I believe it 1,000, right? So in the category of what are all the critics saying, they're talking about the acting and they're talking about Channing Tatum. Yes, check the box, so true. And Channing Tatum, if you're watching this and you wanted props from a woman in the Midwest who watched you on VHS in, what is that movie? The one about soccer and the boy. I must watch that movie a million times. Anyway, doesn't matter. If you wanted some props from me, like, hey, Channing Tatum, not just a hottie with a body, acting skills on point. Okay. Second thing that everybody is saying is that the director, Zoe Kravitz, does a great job. This is apparently her directorial debut, which, girl, send it, like, so good. There was a lot of talk about the cinematography that makes me want to rewatch the film, because as a non-movie critic, as just an audience member who walked off the street and decided to go to a movie for the first time in forever, because this one just like tickled my fancy, I didn't notice a lot of things about the cinematography. But what other critics have said is like, and when I think back on it, it makes sense. There was a lot of like shot, 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 you know, clip, 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 clip. And then there was this one scene that was almost ballet-like, where it was a long shot and it circled around the characters, blah, 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 blah. And so that mix is kind of like a dance, right? Of like, I didn't notice that. Nor did I notice that that same ballet sort of movement with the camera is replicated and mirrored later on in the movie, and is a extremely different context and emotional tenor. And like the juxtaposition and the mirroring of those two is actually quite poignant. I missed that. And I want to see it again so that I can watch that art form now that I know that it's there. I couldn't have told you that while being in the movie, because I was too in the story to notice the technique, right? But A+ on like artwork. So that's cool. And it was visually stunning. Like the colors they used, and they're on this beautiful tropical island. Like, it was great. I would also say within the director being great category, not just the cinematography, but the pace. And this is something that I actually did notice as an audience member, that the pace of the scenes and the story was quick. And as somebody who lives in a TikTok world, my patience is low, right? And it was interesting. I could feel in the beginning of the movie, they were moving from scene to scene to scene to scene to scene. And I remember thinking in that at a certain point, like, I'm usually a little bit bored by now. Do you know what I mean? Like, the director, Zoe Kravitz, had moved us along. And like, she was like, hey, we know you're here because you get the premise of the movie and you want to get to the island. So I'm going to show you all of the flaws that these characters have and how they get to the island. And I'm just going to get you there. You know what I mean? And I was like, I very much appreciate that. I felt like every scene, if a scene had lasted like another 5 seconds, because everybody in this world has ADHD, I think I would have been shifting in my chair, but it wasn't too long. Like, it kept us moving the whole way through. So I thought that was awesome. And I also felt like deeply respected. Is that weird to say? That's probably weird to say, but I felt like the director was thinking about me and thinking about the audience and thinking about the patience level that we have and moving us along with a lot of intentionality. And I don't know, I just really appreciated that, and it all worked. So we've got Channing Tatum's acting skills, we've got Zoe Kravitz's directorial debut, cinematography, and pace. Love it. And then the last thing that all of the critics are saying, they're talking about how it's a good mix of genres, right? Like, this is primarily psychological thriller, but there's also a lot of dark humor. And I think that's really difficult to mix, right? Like, how do you keep people tense and on the edge of their seat and then also like make them laugh, right? Like, those things sound like oil and water, but they were actually mixed together seamlessly. Like, it was a really enjoyable film. Okay, so that's what you're hearing everybody say, and I just wanted to comment on that, because how can you not, right? So that's a category of what everybody else is saying, and now I'm going to give my criticism and some things that I noticed. One of my criticisms is on pace and the mix of genres.
But Rachel, you just said that the pace and the genre were fantastic.
They were great, except a couple of times. So there's in a pace, you know, that like sitting in your seat where you're like, yeah, can we like move on? I felt that twice for sure. Once when Sarah, who's kind of like, she was on a version of Survivor basically. So Sarah, the Survivor girl, is giving this speech at the dining room table, and she can sense something's wrong, and we can see that in her body and in her eyes, but she's smiling and having to pretend nothing is wrong. And so she's giving this speech, and I'm gonna be honest, the speech was just long. It was just long. I was like, okay, we can move on now, right? I felt the same way at the very end where there's a conversation with the therapist and the whole conversation is like a nothing burger. I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? What are you talking about? This doesn't matter, right? So I felt like both of those scenes just like dragged on unnecessarily. But like to have two flaws in an otherwise perfectly paced film, like I'm not gonna complain that much. But I also said the mix of genres, right? So the psychological thriller, mixed with the dark humor. There's some dark humor in the climax of the scene that I just felt like should have been removed. It didn't add to the growing tension or what was happening. Like it felt very hokey, and I feel like that should have just been removed. But c'est la vie. Okay, and then also talking about the climax of the movie, and again, we're not in the spoilers yet, so I'm going to avoid saying who's doing what, but in the climax, you have person A and person B kind of going into a showdown, right? And person A, something happens to them where they kind of like wake up, is how I'm gonna put it. And then they're like confused and disoriented about like what's going on. And person A was supposed to be the bad person, the bad guy, right? And then when they wake up, not only are they disoriented, but they're like a nice person. And I was confused if the process of them waking up was their like true self, right? I'm like, oh, is person A actually a good person and they just needed this thing to happen to like jolt them out of whatever psychological delusion they were under, right? That's what I'm thinking as I'm watching this through. Of like, they're not just like woken up and disoriented and confused. They're a different person, or they're acting kind, right? And I'm like, that's weird. And then just as I'm thinking that, the camera pans to person B. And there are flames and fire lighting person B's face from the bottom up. And this person looks evil, right? And person B has been a good person the whole time. And I'm sitting here like Jengaing all of the pieces of the puzzle together. And I'm like, oh my God, person B, who was a good person the entire time, is actually the villain. Oh my God. And I'm trying to like remember everything that's happened and like figure out how it's all going to piece together. I'm like, this is, oh my God, there's a twist upon a twist upon a twist. What? And then none of that was true. Nope. Person A actually was a bad person and person B was a good person. And that was very jarring. The whole, that whole moment was so confusing that it pulled me out of the film, because I was like, wait, what's happening? It would have been different if person A had like woken up and been disoriented, but then still have been the villain. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure what should have been written in the script to make that clear. They should have said something like, you know, this isn't supposed to happen until later or something, right? Because of the script and the switch from villain to potentially good guy, plus the cinematography of lighting person B the way that they were, like, it just, it was really unclear and very jarring about, like, I thought there was a twist and then there wasn't. I haven't seen anyone else talk about that, so maybe I'm just dumb, but that's what I thought was happening, like, in the moment. Okay, so in the category of my criticism, moments of pace and the dark humor mix of genre in the climax, at the climax, person A and person B and the confusion of what's happening there. And then number 3, there's a gay guy and what we see happen to him and what Slater King tells him his role is or was or has been. They don't match. And it's not an intentional, metaphorical, like, supposed to not match. It's a gap in the storyline. It's a total disconnect between what we saw happen to this gentleman and what is being claimed he did or didn't do, right? It doesn't match. I talked to some girls after the movie and we were like excited about it and it was so fun. But we also, one of the things that we dissected was this gay guy's role. We were like, that didn't make any sense. And afterwards, when I went home, and I found out like I watched a bunch of movie critics and they were talking about the theme. I was like, oh, the gay guy was supposed to represent, how do I say this without spoilers? People who just like stand around and watch and don't do anything, right? And I was like, but that's not what we saw. So you really tried to push that he was supposed to represent that hard, and it didn't make sense. It didn't work. Sorry, no. I considered putting under this category of my criticism the final scene. You'll see a lot of critics talking about the final scene and how it just like didn't land the plane and it didn't fit the message of the film. I don't disagree. I feel like the last couple of minutes of the film was kind of a head scratcher and not in a good like mystery psychological thriller kind of a way, but in a like, what were you doing there kind of a way. And I thought about including that in my criticism, but if I'm honest, I didn't mind the imperfection. Like, it didn't bother me. It didn't leave me on a sour note at the end of the film. Could it have been better? Probably, but like, I just decided not to. Well, I guess I included it because I'm talking about it right now, but it just wasn't high on my list of like bummers, right? Okay, so we've talked about what other critics are saying, we talked about my criticism, and now we go to my favorite category, which is laughing at myself. Okay, so I didn't know that this movie comes with a trigger warning. I didn't like get that memo. And honestly, if I had gotten the heads up that there was a trigger warning, honestly, I wouldn't have paid attention to it anyway because everything gets a trigger warning these days, so it really means nothing at all. That said, there is a moment where like everything has been building and then we finally see what's behind the mask, essentially, like what actually is going on. And I thought I was ready for it because that turn, while graphic, was not exploitative, right? It kind of felt inevitable. It was building there. So I wasn't surprised. I didn't need a trigger warning for it. And like, I'm an adult, right? That said, wow. I was thinking about it in terms of like, you know, when you go to the chiropractor, my dad was a chiropractor. They like take your head and they kind of like turn it to the side and they like get you ready and you're like, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm okay. I'm okay. All right. So they warm you up for it. You're nervous, but okay. And then like, that's how it felt. Like, oh, Jesus. Oh, no, my world has been flipped upside down. I thought I was ready and I was not ready. Take it back. I my head got snapped like 90 degrees. So, whoo! I understand why there's a trigger. I was okay. So I feel like they warm you up. They let you know that it's coming. They zoom in on a piece of jewelry, and you kind of know that you're about to experience a flashback. And you're like, okay, yeah, I'm ready for it. And then they fucking snap your neck. Like, I curled up and like put my hands over my ears because I don't understand when people who cover their eyes, you can still hear it. Cover your own eyeball. There are eyelids for a reason. But if you do that, you can still hear things and then you can see them in your mind's eye. No, these are made for a reason. Wow! Yeah, the trigger warning is real. I also wonder if, like, I've noticed that I can take a lot of graphic nature, right? And always have been able to. But the older I get, the less I can take it. Ironically, the more sensitive I become. I don't know what that is about getting older and experiencing the world and knowing the vulnerabilities that exist, and like you have more loved. I don't know. Whatever. Okay, you get the idea. So, wow, there's that. Okay. Number 2 in the category of things to laugh at myself about, or for you to laugh at me about, whichever, fine. There's a, okay, here's where we might have some spoilers coming in. I would put this in the category of light spoilers because it happens early in the film. I think I've done a good job of disguising everything up until now, but I'm going to talk about some, like a line that they say. So light spoilers, and coming up is like definite spoilers. So you were warned. At the very beginning of the film, or very early on in the film, before they even go to the island, Frida, our main character, says to her best friend, stop going back to your ex-boyfriend. He's taking all of your power, kind of a thing. And it was off. It was off for a couple of reasons. It felt old. It felt dated. There's something about the script that didn't feel authentic, and it pulled me out of the movie for a second. There was something like, I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was something about like, don't let that man take your power. That felt like a relic of the social zeitgeist. I don't know how long it takes to like script, film, edit, and produce a film, but it felt out of the wave of like what people would say. Or, and this is where you get to laugh at me, it could be that that's a Hollywood bubble and I live in the Midwest. Like in my real life, nobody talks that way, right? And later, when I discovered what the underlying theme of the movie was, I was like, yeah, I get why they put that line in there, but they like forced it to make it work. Kind of like the gay guy that I talked about earlier. So, yeah. I was like, people don't talk like that. Maybe they do, but not in my world. So it was just odd. Okay. Here's the last one in the laugh at me category, our final category. And there are definitely spoilers here because I'm not sure how I'm going to be able to talk about this without there being spoilers. So these are like big, massive red flag spoilers. If you don't want to hear anything about this, you need to stop now. And time's up. Okay, so I watched this film. I think it's amazing. The credits roll. I turn to the women behind me. We end up talking about the movie together for like 30 minutes. I go home on this like high of feeling like I did a roller coaster, and I watched this like art form, and I'm just amazed. And then I want to like soak in that feeling. So I watch a bunch of YouTube videos from movie critics that are talking about the movie, and they're talking about the theme of the movie. And they're saying things like, yeah, I mean, my God, it was like too on the nose. it was really browbeating, super obvious, like, ugh, did you have to lecture us in the message and theme of this movie? I did not know that was the theme of the movie. And so the theme of the movie is basically there are four or five main women on the island, and what they are supposed to represent is like different reactions to sexual assault, right? Whether that's curling up and trying to go away, or rage, or fighting, right? Sarah, the survivor girl, or Frida is always talking about like wanting to forget, and maybe it would be better to forget, right? And so everybody was like, ugh, this like feminist narrative, my God. So that's why like them talking about power in the beginning of the movie, where I was like, my ear triggered, where I was like, that's weird. And where the gay guy is supposed to represent the person who just like stands around and does nothing. I'm like, oh, okay, but we saw something different. So they were trying to like make that all come together, and like I can see now why the movie critics would have been like, that was too on the nose, right? Except for the fact that I didn't know that was the theme. I thought it was a completely different theme entirely, and the theme that I have in my head is way better. Okay, follow me on this. So when they first get to the island, Slater King and Frida, our main character, are walking across the grounds together. And Slater says, I'm seeing a therapist because I have some repressed memories that I want to pull up out of the dark and deal with, right? And Frida says, like, why would you want to remember? Like, let it lie, let it go. Who would want to remember that terrible stuff? I saw my mom die in front of me, and I wish I could forget, right? And I'm sitting there as an audience member going, ooh, that's interesting, right? I thought the theme of the movie was, is it better to have had bad things happen, but push them down and keep them repressed? Or Frida, who wishes she could forget? Because that's something that's talked about in my circles or in therapy circles. Like, first of all, are repressed memories real? And B, do we really need to therapize every living thing? Like, let dead dogs die, lying dogs lie, whatever, just let the past be the past, right? Or is it better to face the dragon, fight it, get the gold, right? But then you remember, okay? So I thought that this was the theme the whole time. And part of that's because the forgetfulness thing permeates the movie, right? If all of the women are supposed to represent different ways of dealing with sexual assault, wishing you could forget is like the number one, right? And Frida has told us, I wish I could forget, in the beginning of the movie. And then she goes through this whole journey, and all of a sudden she is facing another woman who wakes up. And the woman says, I didn't want to wake up. I preferred to forget. And then there's a fight scene, and Frida stabs her. And the woman says, you were supposed to help me. And Frida says, bitch, I tried. And I was like, this is so brilliant, right? Frida, at the beginning of the film, says, I wish I could forget. And then fast forward, she's facing a woman who says, I only want to forget. It is her old self. And she kills her old self and says, bitch, I tried to save you. And I'm moving on, right? I'm in the theater thinking, this is brilliant. I mean, damn, right? And then there's this big climactic scene with Slater King. And again, spoilers, the house burns down, blah, blah, blah. Frida saves Slater King instead of letting him burn down with the house. And I was sitting there going, okay, she's like cradling him in her lap. And I'm like, okay, so what is Slater King supposed to represent? Is he her trauma? Right? And she has, but then why would she save her trauma instead of letting it burn? Well, maybe he is the physical embodiment of like, I can't ignore it anymore. Here it is. And I can't get rid of it because it happened, right? But I'm not going to ignore it anymore. I'm going to hold it, cherish it, become better because of its adversity. I don't know. But I was sitting there like, how does that all work? And then we have the last 2 minutes of the film where they're at like a gala thing and it's like a flip back to power. And I was like, I don't get it. And then I went home and they're like, no, it's a feminist lecture and it's so on the nose. And I was like, oh, shit. I mean, so much for being on the nose. Apparently I'm not that smart because I didn't get it. And also, I like my theme better. I think my theme could have been really cool. So, take that. All right, so that is my review of Blink Twice. What everybody is saying, Channing Tatum is awesome at acting, not just a hottie with a body, but acting skills on point. All of the actors were on point, but Channing in particular. Zoe Kravitz directorial debut blew that bitch out of the water. Mix of genres, psychological thriller, and dark humor. Then in the segment of like my criticism, sometimes the pace was a little bit slow. There were a couple of like longer monologues that I was like, move on. And also the dark humor in the climax of the scene just didn't work. Also, that switch between person A and person B, of which you now know who they are, probably if you got this far for the spoilers, was jarring and confusing and disorienting, and I didn't think it worked. And then number 3, like the gay guy, there's a disconnect between what actually happened and what we're being told his role was supposed to be. Last but not least, laughing at me category, the trigger warning and the chiropractor. Oh shit! Even if I was given heads up, I would not have been prepared for that. Yowza. And then also that, okay, maybe I'm just like Midwest and out of touch, but I didn't understand the language of like, take back your power, girl. Okay. And then the theme about feminism and taking back your powerism, when I thought it was a much deeper and more universal message about how to deal with trauma and incorporate your world and become a better, stronger person moving forward. Anyway, going back to the beginning of this video, the TLDR is, it's a great freaking movie and you should watch it. The end. Thanks. See you next time. Ciao.